Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. And this week on the show, we have part 2 of the murder of Karen Silkwood. I'm Patrick Ryan, joined by Dennis Cheney. Hi, Dennis.
Hello, Patrick. And
So you
this
ready
is a bonus.
Yeah, this is going to be a bonus. I think we're going to just release this off schedule as an extra thing just because. Because if you listen to the first one, there's definitely some suspense built up in the story. Let's recap a little bit, I guess. I guess before we do that, thank you everybody who's been subscribing, liking, sharing everything. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. Keep doing that. Tell your friends. If you want to know where we're getting all our information, it's on the sources page on it's the sources tab on crypticaccounts.com, so you can check all that out. So, Dennis, let's go back over what happened to Ms. Karen Silkwood.
You want me to do my best? I can try.
If you want to, I've already got a pretty good summary in my head.
All right,
though.
go ahead.
I've been going over this quite a bit. So far we've met Karen Silkwood. She's really into chemistry and all that. She ends up moving to Oklahoma after getting divorced in 1972 to work at Kerr-McGee's plutonium refinery, where she realizes that the safety precautions are terrible. People are having their faces melted off by plutonium. Just a lot of bad things are happening. She joins the union. She becomes a union rep, one of 3, and she starts uncovering stuff that shows that there may be some records getting changed as far as like amounts of plutonium that are going places. So there's some inaccuracies there that she's discovered. She's put that together along with safety stuff. She's on her way in 1974 in November after being poisoned with plutonium for no real reason. We're still not sure why. Found a bunch of plutonium in her refrigerator on some bologna and cheese, and it got tracked all around her apartment. She tested positive 3 days in a row. The next week, she's put this folder together, and she's getting ready to go meet with a New York Times reporter and disclose all this information she's put together, along with a union rep that is going to pass all this information along. And on the way there, she mysteriously runs off the road and dies, smashes into a culvert and dies. We're not sure why. And the manila folder, when they get to the scene and everything, the first police officer remembers it being there, puts papers in the car, and then by the time the car is recovered, the papers are gone. So investigations happen. Where we left off, the FBI had just closed their case in 1975 after a year of investigation. No suspects. We don't know who did it.
Well, I suspect a few folks.
There's definitely some folks that can be suspected or should be suspected. If you didn't listen to the first part, definitely go back and listen to the first part and get the full story on what's going on with Karen Silkwood. But that being said, did you feel like I summed it up pretty well there, Dennis?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I'm glad you got the faces melting off part. That was
that part really stuck with me.
That's all I can think about for the last.
And then they're just spraying it down the drain, just the goo.
Oh, I forgot about the spraying it down the drain.
Yeah, they did. His face melted off, and then they sprayed that stuff down the drain. And I'm assuming everybody just went back to work.
Also, keeping the plutonium in the desk drawers.
Oh yeah, that is a good part right there. Yeah, plutonium found in desk drawers. And if you don't know, plutonium is pretty cancerous. So that is where we are. So the FBI has dropped their case. Now, in the opinion of a congressional investigator, the official handling of the case amounted to a cover-up, which
the FBI's handling.
No, this is a congressional investigator. This is
they're saying the FBI covered it up, though?
They're saying somebody covered something up.
Okay, all right.
It's just they called it a cover-up. Something's going on here. So I want to kind of double back to the FBI's actual investigation. Now, Larry Olson was the FBI agent who investigated Silkwood's death starting at the end of 1974. So in December, he gets on the case, I believe. She had died November 13th in that car wreck. Olson's first stop was Kerr-McGee's 30-story granite headquarters in downtown Oklahoma City, where he chatted with Security Chief Reading and WC nicknamed Spot Gentry. Old Spot Gentry.
Old Spot.
He was an FBI agent who had hired Ellen at Kerr-McGee as a security consultant. So you got the head of security, you've got this retired FBI agent who are working security at this very lax plant. So Reading and Gentry were soon plying Olson with notes on Silkwood's sex and drug habits. Because when you're working a murder case, that's the first thing you want to tell them, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Um, Olson did copy everything down. Reading's mind was already made up. Silkwood's allegations about the company should be disqualified because she was bisexual. Lesbies don't care. They'll do anything, he said. And because narcotics paraphernalia had been found in her apartment.
Well, this is at the point where they're trying to frame her and saying
As
that
the,
she, yeah, stole the plutonium herself and poisoned herself by sticking it up inside her body.
all the holes. Could have been any of them, according to them.
Yeah.
So Olson interviewed Silkwood's friends and satisfied himself that she had experimented with, in his FBI jargon, switch hitting, but he could not connect bisexuality to her death. Weird.
That's
Weird.
weird.
So
It's like her hands couldn't decide which way to go while she was driving. She's like, "Am I straight? Am I gay?" And then she just veered off the road.
it's sad, but it happens so often. I mean, just
I know.
that the 1970s, man, just that was a valid reason. Like people would accept that to some extent. Like must have been that. So
Well, it's mental illness.
what's that?
Well, it's considered a mental illness.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
So Olson turned to the trace alcohol that had been found in her bloodstream. For a while, he was obsessed with finding the source of the alcohol. He checked with a cafe where she'd eaten supper and chased leads as far as Idaho, which I don't know what he was doing as far as Idaho that would have her drinking. She wasn't in Idaho. I couldn't really find anything about why he did that, but he was looking all over the place for some reason. The alcohol, though, regardless of where it came from, was not enough to contribute to her falling asleep at the wheel, he determined. Of more significance, he thought, was the 0.35 milligrams of Quaalude that the autopsy had revealed. Silkwood's nerves had begun to erode as she sneaked Kerr-McGee documents in the manila folder in the month before she died, and a doctor prescribed the chalky white Quaaludes to help her sleep at night, but her friends say she was taking them during the day as well. So the question was whether the 0.35 milligrams, less than one pill, was enough to lull her to sleep. That's what I mean. She's been popping them during the day.
If anything, she needed more.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going to find some people agree with you on that. So the Oklahoma City medical examiner, A.J. Chipman, said yes, that was enough. But 8 independent toxicologists interviewed separately by different government, everybody that was investigating all had toxicologists look at her blood and everything. Everybody else disagreed with Chapman, partly because they felt Silkwood had built up a tolerance on a regular diet of the pills,
Right.
Which is, I think, the conclusion. Most people who know anything about regular drug use like that are, yeah, she would have built something up. She's also really stressed out, and she's driving to like a big event, like for her, like that's not the time you're just going to pass out. So regardless, though, Olson opted to suppress his curiosity and accept Chapman's verdict, which was the guy that said that it was the pills that did it to her, without consulting the other toxicologists. I don't know why he did that, but he didn't go talk to anybody else. He just accepted the state's medical examiner, and that was enough. So he at this point, he's convinced she's died of a drug stupor. Besides, he had been preoccupied with an aspect of the case that was truly enigmatic. The flecks of plutonium that had suddenly appeared on Silkwood's skin, and in her digestive system the week before her death. So he's like, okay, so I don't know where all the, like, this little bit of alcohol, this little bit of Quaalude, I don't know what exactly that did, but she's got plutonium all over her, and I don't know why. So he starts chasing down that way. So the Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC, had investigated her contamination and concluded that Silkwood had been infected in her apartment. Olson, though, was puzzled by how the plutonium, which by law had to be kept under strict security, could have escaped the plant.
I wonder.
And she's also just like a lab tech. Like she's not somebody that's going in and messing with fuel rods and stuff like that. Like she
Sounds like
knows.
everybody had access to this stuff. Yeah, but it was like
Well,
actual flax. I get what you're saying. It was actual
yeah.
particles. Yeah.
But if it's that easy, why are you taking it out in such a dangerous way? Also, like if you can get it out that easy, it's in desk drawers. Like why? I
Right.
guess
That's
I guess because there is detectors as they're walking out of the building. So I could see that to some extent. It still seems very hard. And again, extremely dangerous to put plutonium in your body. Like any way she would have been able to smuggle that amount in herself would have likely killed her.
and storing it in your fridge. I mean, not the smartest.
Yeah. So while Olson initially had no misgivings about Kerr-McGee's motives, he began to grow uneasy about the company's past assessment of Silkwood's role. Silkwood's friends informed him that she had been genuinely scared when she discovered her insides were corrupted with plutonium, which can cause, as we talked about, cancer even in very small doses. The description did not fit the portrait of a cool-handed actress schemingly popping plutonium in her mouth. Like if you're doing that on purpose, you're not going to go freak out to your friends.
Yeah. The whole thing doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Somebody put the plutonium in her fridge. In her food.
What's okay? There it is. You got a puppy scratching over there. I hear a pig.
I'm sorry.
So
I didn't
what?
know it was under me.
So what nagged at Olson's curiosity most of all was the bologna and cheese in her refrigerator. The AEC inspector had found that the highest concentration of plutonium in the apartment, as we talked about, was oddly on those two sandwich foods. So while Olson is mulling all this, NPR reported in late December, so this is all in the first few weeks, that the AEC was worried about 40 pounds of plutonium that could not be accounted for at the Kerr-McGee plant.
Oh, wow.
At the same time, David Burnham, the reporter who was to meet Silkwood at the Holiday Inn, the guy from the New York Times, quoted government sources in the New York Times as saying that up to 60 pounds of plutonium might be missing.
And
So,
just for our listeners, we discussed last episode that a softball size of this stuff is enough to theoretically kill everyone on Earth.
yes, if you divided that softball-sized amount of plutonium up, you could give cancer to every household in the world, which is just great. And
And
yeah,
we're missing 60 pounds.
yeah, a lot of softballs. A lot of softballs. Actually, a lot of atomic bombs, really. Several. I think that's probably double digit.
What do you think they were, other than poisoning her baloney, like, what are you doing with this stuff? Selling it to other governments, maybe?
I've kind of gone back and forth with that. There was some theories that it was being used in secret government projects. There was
Uh,
also some that we were arming Israel at the time and giving it out that way because the main customer, remember, is the government.
right.
So, and they're also who's inspecting everything. It's a weird system we've got going here. So I don't know.
You think you
There,
just, if it's the government, though, if it's our government who's also the main customer, you think they just fudge the books?
I also kind of wonder if Kerr-McGee, and I think we're gonna look at some stuff that points to it. I don't know if I've talked about it yet. It kind of seems like they could maybe, there's legal loopholes to where maybe they were getting around selling it to third parties as well, but they
Mm.
wouldn't want the government to know that they're doing that. So, the grade of plutonium being processed at Kerr-McGee had a price set by the government of $70 a gram.
Whew.
But on the black market, it could sell for 5 to 10 times that much. So 60 pounds in the 70s could have been worth 5 to 10 million.
Yeah.
A lot of plutonium.
If I already had some of that in my desk drawer, I'd be shopping that market.
I mean, I don't know how you sell it, but yeah, it's got some price tags. I feel like you're gonna deal with some really shady people to get rid of it though. So Olson, without pressing Kerr-McGee for details, confirmed that the company had been having troubles with their inventory. His curiosity was aroused. Silkwood had been contaminated with plutonium. That was indisputable. The plutonium had come from Kerr-McGee plant. That was a near certainty. Some 40 to 60 pounds of plutonium was unaccounted for. That appeared to be a well-grounded allegation. Olson developed a theory. Silkwood had been stealing plutonium. In early January 1975, he took his theory to Ted Rozak, the acting agent in charge of the FBI's Oklahoma City Bureau. Olson wanted permission to open up a new line of investigation into the alleged disappearance of the plutonium. Rozak hesitated, according to a confidant of his, and then decided to discuss the situation with an old friend, William D. Bruler, the agent then in charge of the Atlanta Bureau, who apparently advised him to submit Olson's request directly to FBI headquarters.
See, that tells me that that the government was involved.
They're already like, I don't know how to handle this. Send it to the top. Let them decide what we do right now. Because that, yeah, again, it seems like they already kind of know stuff's going on.
Right.
So, and William advised him to submit Olson's request directly to the FBI headquarters, as we said. Olson obligingly prepared an official letterhead memo, and remember that term, it's important, outlining the evidence, being careful not to sound reckless or foolish. According to Rozak's friend, who says he saw a copy of the memo, Rozak attached his personal note to the letterhead memo, recommending that Olson be giving the go-ahead. The response from FBI headquarters, though, was an unequivocal rejection that shunned both Olson and Rozak. Quote, Washington sent back an LHM, letterhead memo, telling Olson to forget about the missing plutonium, that it didn't have anything to do with Silkwood's case. Rozak's friend says, in effect, he was told not to poke his nose where it didn't belong.
Right. The government knows. It's like you said, secret projects, giving it to Israel, etc.
It's missing, but the people that are in control they're aware, I think.
Yeah.
Kerr-McGee is doing something. Obviously, the government's involved. So, in response to this, like, Olson is not happy about it. He sends another letterhead memo, which was again seconded by Rozak.
I'm really excited to know what the term letterhead memo ends up becoming relevant. Okay, keep going.
I don't know why. That's like a very, very official document, essentially, within the FBI. Like, if you write a letterhead memo, like, it's like writing on like a stone tablet or something. Like, it's important to them. And you're going to find that, yeah, you'll see. Letterhead memo is going to be around for a little bit. So they sent the second one protesting the decision of FBI headquarters. But that only elicited a sterner warning from Washington to steer clear of a smuggling investigation. Shortly thereafter, Rozak was relieved of his position and transferred to Denver.
Oh, boy.
A move that his colleagues interpreted as a demotion.
Stay out of our business.
Yeah, and you came back and said something else. Guess what? You're going to another state now.
Bye.
Oklahoma's no longer your territory. Now you really don't have to worry about what's going on at this plant because it's not here. Or you're not here. So Olson, meanwhile, stewed about the turgid naysaying of Washington bureaucrats. He was sure the missing plutonium was a clue to Silkwood's contamination. He became so consumed that he broke one of the first rules of the FBI's secrecy code and phoned Joe Pennington, a young prize-winning newsman, then at a radio station called KTOK in Oklahoma City. Pennington says that Olson, in the grip of outrage and confusion, explained his theory that a smuggling ring was at large in the plant. That coincided with other information Pennington had picked up. So in late January, he went on the air with the possibility that smugglers were responsible for the missing plutonium.
Ooh.
Now, earlier in January, Pennington had broadcast a report from a confidential Kerr-McGee source that 40 to 50 pounds of plutonium seemed to be missing. In response to that, Kerr-McGee had sent a letter to the station, and it said that, quote, the letter pointed out that I was reporting on a very sensitive area and that I might inadvertently be jeopardizing national security. That's according to Pennington. Now, at the time, KTOK officials had assured him that they would not be intimidated by this. But after his broadcast about smuggling, Pennington says, I got the feeling Kerr-McGee was putting more pressure on the station. It wasn't long before it was made clear to me that I was to drop the Silkwood story and move on to other things. So, because he was already embroiled in an unrelated power struggle at the station, Pennington left the station in early February for another news job at a radio station in Columbus, Ohio. So he's out. Like he says it gets blasted on the radio. Kerr-McGee, it seems like they probably got more aggressive with the station. So he had only been in Columbus a few weeks when he says that Olson phoned, this is Pennington, the FBI agent told him he had just learned from a Kerr-McGee source that up to 120 pounds of plutonium were now missing.
Whoa.
Most of it since Silkwood's death. So it's like somebody's trying to speed up whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Like they're on to us. We got to move as much as possible in case they figure this out and shut us down. So Olson at this point kind of starts to revise his thinking a little bit. He now suspects that the Union higher-ups are stealing the plutonium, and they contaminated Silkwood to undermine Kerr-McGee. He felt Silkwood had possibly been just a pawn or a patsy. Olson entreated Pennington to turn his news hound's attention to the Union OCA. So a few days later, Olson called again, but Pennington's new employer was not interested in a story that was 4 months old and 4 states away. And by this time, the media in Oklahoma City had also kind of begun to neglect the Silkwood case.
It's amazing that with the company interfering, that his theory would go to the Union.
Yeah.
It just seems like he's looking everywhere but where all the signs point to. Like the FBI saying, don't look into this. This is national security.
Well, I don't know if I've mentioned this. He was a liaison to Kerr-McGee at one point for the FBI. And he was an Oklahoma agent. He's from Oklahoma.
You told me that. He just must have a lot of trust for them. It just seems like so obvious that it's the higher ups doing it, not like some scheme by the Union.
Well, I think
120
I didn't go
pounds.
into it as much when he met the security director and the what was he, an FBI agent that was there, like contracting or whatever. Anyway, at Kerr-McGee, I found some stuff that I guess Olson kind of had a thing for like titillating stuff. Like he'd been known at one point, I forget who it was with. I didn't put it in the notes, but he had shared Martin Luther King's like bedroom tapes with like different, like I think congressmen and stuff. Like he was kind of known to like stuff like that. So I think they knew that about him. And then when they started talking about the bisexual stuff, I think he just kind of became buddy with him.
He's a leaker.
Yeah. So the Justice Department, Dennis, which has jurisdiction over the FBI, seemed even more anxious to get rid of the case. Before Olson's reports were finished, Phil Willens, chief of the Justice Department's Management and Labor section, was portraying the investigation as a foregone conclusion. On February 12th, Weiland sent a memo to Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Keeney, which said that no criminality was involved in the case, even though at this point, Weiland had only seen 3 of the 11 FBI field reports. And that was when the official, and that's how the FBI ended their investigation.
Man.
So in mid-April, Weiland's directed, or he decides it's going to end then. They got to wind it down through official bureaucracy. So in mid-April, Weiland's directed Thomas Goldstein, a young lawyer in the Management and Labor section, to draft a final fact memorandum, a procedure which usually means sifting through all the evidence and reaching an independent verdict. But Goldstein entered the case only 2 weeks before he was scheduled to leave the Justice Department for a job in Miami. A period in which, he had also had to foreclose some federal litigation in New York. So he's already got a caseload and stuff.
Yeah.
And these things, we're going to talk about a little. A final fact memorandum is supposed to be like a huge document. Like they're usually like 100 pages. And this guy's got 2 weeks to go over all these reports. He should talk to all the witnesses and stuff like that.
He's already got 1 foot out the door.
Yep. He's like on a 2-week notice basically at this point. He's getting ready to leave. So a congressional investigator said, "We found that Goldstein made no attempt to clarify the contradictions that screamed out all over the place. He never even contacted Olson."
Wow.
So the FBI field agent on the case, the guy who's writing the final report, doesn't even contact the lead investigator. Goldstein's fact memorandum focused only on A.O. Pipkin's hit and run theory. So you remember the guy that showed up that was the best crash detective essentially, and he was who said like there's no way like she would have drifted the other way, like she wouldn't have done what happened. Like there were scratches on the bumper that seemed to indicate that there was metal and metal contact. There was no dust on it, which didn't make sense for the area. Like if that scratch had already been there, it looked like somebody had nudged her off the road.
Right.
So, to Pipkin, the tire tracks at the scene indicated that Silkwood had skidded violently off the left side of the highway, then had straightened the wheel and driven along the shoulder for nearly 100 yards. She had not tried to return to the highway as if another car prevented her from doing so, until she saw the lurking culvert and frantically turned the steering wheel. Pipkin had disputed the highway patrol's asleep and drifting theory on 3 points, which we've kind of talked about. He argued that a drifting car, as a reason or report simulation of the accident later showed, would have veered into a field before it reached the culvert. He also felt that the highway's center line crest should have steered a drifting car to the right, not to the left, and the dent in the Honda's rear bumper, free of customary road film that had come from driving the dusty prairie, seemed to him tangible proof that another vehicle had banged into Silkwood's car. Goldstein, though, ignored Pipkin's first point and just discounted the other two. One reason the Honda crashed on the left, Goldstein wrote, was a furious wind that helped shove the lightweight car to its destruction.
Nobody in the 70s did their job.
It's seeming that way, doesn't it? That's how the Scientologists were able to like infiltrate every area of government because everybody's just slacking off. I'm assuming drinking in the afternoon.
For real.
So a fellow Justice Department official later described the winds more specifically as being 60 to 70 miles per hour at the time of the crash.
That's a pretty key detail, if that's true.
It is. But congressional investigators determined that Goldstein's information was predicted solely on a tip from an anonymous caller who had phoned the FBI in Dallas for some reason. So somebody in Dallas is calling Oklahoma, or somebody in Oklahoma is calling Dallas FBI. Why they wouldn't call the Oklahoma FBI, I don't know.
With an anonymous tip about the weather.
Yep. Just so you know, winds were really bad the other day, 60 to 70 miles. Write that down. Write that down. Neither Goldstein or Olson had bothered to check with the National Weather Bureau. Because if they had, they would have found that the wind recorded at the time of accident, exactly where she was, or in that area, was 15 miles per hour out of the north. A modest blow behind the car that should not have interfered with the crash. The dent in the bumper posed a larger dilemma for Goldstein. How's he gonna work around this one? He suggested that Drew Stevens, Silkwood's boyfriend, had contrived the dent after the car was turned over to him.
Wow.
On April 29th, the day before he left the Justice Department, Goldstein issued his fact memorandum. As like I said, those are usually like 100 pages or more. Goldstein's report was 4.5 pages long. His conclusion was the same as his boss Weiland's had predicted 11 weeks earlier before he had looked at all the reports.
You know he wrote that like the night before. You know he had all this stuff on his plate. He's like, I'll get to it. And they're like, hey, don't forget that memo. And he's like, all right. And he's like up at like 12 o'clock, like pounding out a 4-page memo.
Yeah, it was not. I don't feel like it was a top priority for this guy at all. Again, just phoning it in. Like, why do you give it to the guy that's getting ready to leave? Because you don't really want it to turn out to anything. You want somebody to rush through it and just just agree with the reports that are already in front of them and what their boss is saying.
And I'm sure they said, good job.
Yep. Oh, yeah, for sure. This is great. We love it. So, Okay, so he delivers it, and like I said, no foul play. The fact memorandum was supposed to be the final official conclusion on everything, but Larry Olson, our FBI agent, wasn't ever really told about this final fact memorandum. So he remained on the lookout for a way to investigate the OCA. So he's still on the Union Trail and perk up flagging media interest in the case. So he's like still trying to do things. He's like, I don't know how nobody knows he's still on this, but he's still on this. So
It's because no one cared. It's because it was the 70s. We're like, we're gonna move you from Oklahoma to Denver. He's like, I'm still gonna call people and investigate things. And they're like, you don't have the legal authority to do that. He's like,
no, he wasn't who got moved to Denver.
Oh,
that was his boss.
Oh, my bad.
He's still just an Oklahoma agent at this point. Like he kind of travels between Atlanta. He's kind of all over the place, but right now they've left him in Oklahoma. Why, I don't know. But yeah, he was not moved to anywhere else. So he's just still on his own. I couldn't find anything about like who his new superior was. Like, I didn't dig real hard, but like it doesn't seem like anybody's really watching him at this point. The guy who was watching him got fired, and now he's just kind of off doing his own thing.
Just doing his own thing.
Because the people that are really making the decisions about this are somewhere else. They're not in Oklahoma.
Everyone's on lewds.
Everybody there just wants this case to go away. So I'm going to call her Jackie. It's Jacques, I think, but I'm going to call her Jackie. I don't know which way I should say that. But Saruji, and I'm just, again, going to call her Jackie because that's the only time I'm going to say that last name. So Jackie Saruji, a one-time wide-eyed FBI informant who at the time was now a matronly 32-year-old journalist. She first learned about Silkwood's mystery while authoring 2 articles on nuclear power for the Nashville magazine in late 1974. The article landed Jackie a small advance from a fledgling Nashville publishing company to write a book about the nuclear industry. So Jackie planned to devote a chapter to the Silkwood case because she expected a first-hand account from Olson. A decade before, when Jackie Saruji, I feel like I'm saying that right, we're going to go with it, was a cub reporter at the Nashville Banner. Her publisher had instructed her to supply the FBI with special reports on civil rights and anti-war demonstrations she'd covered.
Ooh.
Olson, our FBI agent who's still just on the Silkwood case, had been her control agent in Nashville between 1963 and 1967. So they know each other. They're buddies. And I will say this, they get along really well. They're friends. So Saruji left the Banner in 1968, and Olson moved to Oklahoma City soon afterward. She switched briefly to a job at the rival Nashville Tennessean without telling her new editors of her FBI other life. But she quit to spend more time with her 3 children and began freelancing. Then in 1975, the FBI took a renewed interest in Saruji. While researching her book, she had gone to the Soviet embassy in Washington to get the USSR's take on nuclear power. There, she met the second secretary of the embassy, Sergei Zaitsev, not realizing that Zaitsev had long been suspected of being a KGB colonel. When the FBI's surveillance cameras spotted her talking to Zaitsev, the FBI recruited her to spy on him. Her assignment to unmask Zaitsev, however, ran afoul of her excursion with the Silkwood case. So she's kind of investigating Silkwood, but then the FBI is like, hey, we noticed you're over here talking to this guy, because she's just interested in nuclear power.
Yeah.
She's writing a bigger thing about nuclear power, and she's just kind of getting distracted by the Silkwood murder. Like, it's caught her attention. So Saruji decides she's going to go check things out. She arrives in Oklahoma City in early April 1975. Olson arranged for her to meet Kerr-McGee's security chief, Reading. Or old, she's a lesbian, you can't trust her. So Reading tried to indoctrinate her with the tales of Silkwood's sex life that he'd done to Olson. And he confided that the company, in an apparent violation of the law, had hired Pinkerton detectives to monitor OCA activists, as I think we've already talked about.
Yes, we did.
The old Pinkertons. At some point, I don't know if we'll do it on the show, but you and me definitely need to talk about the Pinkertons. So Olson then took her step by step through his investigation and loaned her his files.
Is that normal?
No, let me be clear about that. No, that's not FBI protocol to give a journalist all the files you've been collecting for the last 6 months.
He's not giving it to her. He's loaning
it to her.
You bring back his FBI files, young lady.
Pretty much.
On nuclear power.
Yep. And an investigation on murder. So she photocopied him and then took him back. He engaged her in a labyrinth discussion of the war of the FBI letterhead memos between Oklahoma City and Washington and introduced her to his theory about the missing plutonium and the OCOP. For a while, she joined Olson in pursuit of a solution, but she was handicapped by her deadline for the nuclear writing that she was doing for the Tennessean or whatever. And once she had gathered enough material for a chapter, she grew encouraged about Olson's quest. By summer, she was sidetracked into the Zaitsev caper, as we've talked about. So summer goes by. In October 1975, still going on his own. Nobody has told him to stop. I don't know what's going on. Olson is still going. April is when they did the final fact memorandum.
It's gone rogue.
And here we are in October. He's still getting paid. He's just working away at this. They're very freelance with their field agents, I guess. Or hands off, I should say. So in October of 1975, Olson made one final effort when he finessed FBI protocol and arranged an interview with Dr. Dean Abramson. You'll remember the guy that came in to the factory or the plant and was talking to everybody about plutonium safety, and Silkwood had called him when she'd gotten poisoned, asking for help from a doctor, essentially.
Right.
So he's calling him, asking about plutonium being smuggled out and stuff. Does he know anything about this? And Abramson knew nothing about smuggling. So after Olson returned full-time to other official police work, so around October, they finally figure out he's been doing his own thing for a while, and they start giving him other stuff to do. So Saruji had resumed working part-time on the Tennessean news desk a month earlier. She'd finished her research and written a first draft of her book. Because Olson's cooperation had been extracurricular, she had promised not to use his name in her book or mention the letterhead memos. On August 26, 1975, so come back a little bit, we're going to bring somebody new in. Kitty Tucker, the legislative coordinator for the Washington, D.C. chapter of the National Organization of Women, now Sarah Nelson, who was the National Labor Task Force coordinator for now, and the president, Karen DeCrow, confronted Phil Willens and John Keeney, the two that wrapped up the investigation, and two other Justice Department officials in a carpeted government office.
I did not expect now to get involved. Hello, we are the National Organization on Women.
A lot of twists and turns in this one. So the women demanded to know why Silkwood's case had been closed. The Justice Department men, relying on Goldstein's 4.5-page fact memorandum, tried to explain away the inquiry, but the women were asking for answers that the fact memorandum didn't have.
Listen here, brides. We put a rough guy on the case. See? He wrote a 4.5-page memo. See?
You're not that far off from their response. Kitty Tucker said, they started to get irritated and told us that we must be watching too much TV because in real life, all crimes are not solved. Look, we tried a little bit and we didn't come up with anything.
She was a crazed switch hitter.
Yeah, it was just sticking plutonium up her holes and stuff and eating parts of a Quaalude and dying.
She had a beer in Idaho and stuck a plutonium rod up her.
I will never get over why he was in Idaho. I need to figure that out. But
it's probably just a witness that moved. Probably. It's still hilarious, but
somebody that was there at the cafe or something. You're probably right. So, believe it or not, the Now women were insulted by this reaction and held a press conference and branded the fact memorandum a cover-up.
All right.
So remember, we had the congressional investigators that were also saying all this was a cover-up. So now you've got a separate group who's very influential and motivated in the 70s. Now was a pretty big thing. So in late September, Tucker and Nelson placed a joint call to Silkwood's parents in Nederland, Texas. Bill and Merle Silkwood, they had blamed themselves for not insisting that Karen had come home when she had phoned the day before the accident.
Oh, that's sad.
The next day, they knew she was dead, and after they read Pipkin's report, they suspected murder. Coincidences like this just don't happen, her father said. He was really pleased when the FBI took the case. To Bill Silkwood, the FBI represented old-fashioned integrity. So he was disappointed and chagrined when the FBI and the Justice Department abandoned his daughter's case. On November 13th, the first anniversary of Silkwood's death, now proclaimed it as Karen Silkwood's Memorial Day, Nelson delivered a moving eulogy to a large anti-nuclear rally in New York. 4 days later, 300 nuclear critics from Ralph Nader's sponsored Critical Mass Conference in Washington had a candlelight vigil in Silkwood's memory on the steps of Capitol Hill. Bill Silkwood addressed that gathering. So the same weekend, the media began to resurrect the Silkwood controversy. So, and remember, this is what Olson's been wanting the whole time, too. Like, he's wanted the media to be like, hey, something weird is going on here. And finally, now has found a way to kind of push that forward. So simultaneously, the offices of U.S. Senator Abraham Ribicoff and Lee Metcalf were besieged with letters and phone calls from Now members. Now had targeted Ribicoff and Metcalf because they are chairmen of a committee and subcommittee, respectively, which oversee government operations. So on November 18th, 1975, Tucker and Nelson led a delegation, which included Silkwood's parents, now official Eleanor Smeal, a Ralph Nader representative, a United Auto Workers leader, and a few other associates. I don't know why the auto workers are there, but they're there. That's a big force in the 70s, though, so I think that's what it is you're just getting masses, essentially, behind this. It's another union. It's a big union. So they have a meeting with Ribicoff and Metcalf. The two senators were not prepared for the stampede of solidarity for a dead plutonium worker. Like, it's just, they don't care about these people at all. Nobody cares about these people at all. But they're impressed with their plea and the 8,500 petition signatures Tucker brought them. So they got those quick. And this isn't a day where there's the internet where you can get on and post about it and get people to sign something. Like, they went door to door, had a rally, and got people to sign.
Well, I assume if you run the UAW, you probably can get some few thousand signatures pretty fast. You mean
now?
Well, now and the UAW.
Oh, yeah. So Ribicoff and Metcalf promised everybody that they were going to open the case back up immediately. Metcalf was to be in charge of the new investigation, and his investigators were to have subpoena power. So they've got now they can make people come in and testify and stuff. Like, this is a big deal. Like, now there's going to be official records of things that are being said as we interview people about all this. So Tucker and Nelson were overjoyed. Then 5 months later, just as Metcalf was to commence the public hearings, because they were going to wait until after the election, they were jolted by a turnaround. So December, I believe it was December of the next year. So we're into 76 now. Metcalf announced quietly that he was 5 months later, that he was canceling all the investigation. So they wait for the election to roll by, and then they just don't do anything. He comes out and quietly says they're going to just cancel the investigation and annul his promise to investigate it. So Metcalf's abrupt decision came one day after a visit from Kerr-McGee's chairman of the board, Dean McGee. Metcalf explained that McGee had urged him to drop the investigation because the OCA was now satisfied with the Justice Department's fact memorandum. So now he's saying the union is cool with the fact memorandum.
Okay.
OCA president Al Grosperon quickly rebutted McGee's claim and repeated the union's discontent with the official verdict. But McGee refused to reconsider his decision or to discuss it with his staff. So, nor was he forthcoming about what else McGee had told him. Metcalf did eventually admit, under further questioning from reporters, that McGee had mentioned the issue of missing plutonium, but declined to say whether Kerr-McGee had invoked the specter of national security. So Peter Stockton, a former Budget Bureau economist and Capitol Hill weapons analyst, which that's a weird combo, now a meticulous congressional investigator, was so intrigued by the Silkwood case when he first read about it, he took a leave of absence to fly to Oklahoma City. Through a grant from the Funds for Investigative Journalism, Stockton teamed up with Barbara Newman, NPR's top Washington reporter, and the two spent several weeks exploring the same clues and interrogating the same witnesses as Larry Olson. So in late December 1974, in a late December 1974 radio broadcast, they became the first to reveal Kerr-McGee's inventory problem, the tip that had sent Olson on his search for the missing plutonium in the first place. So there's so many people working this from so many different angles.
Yeah, I was just saying, this is a lot of people. Like, man, I at this point, my theory is, if I had to sum this up, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. This plutonium is going to a secret project, and the government's just like, please leave it alone. But this company is such a mess, and they run this. If they had run the plant better, they probably could have secretly had plutonium coming out and nobody would know, but it's such a mess that they can't even keep their own secrets.
Yeah, it's because they had so many safety issues that people were looking at them trying to figure out what was going on. So, Stockton and Newman returned to Washington, irritated with their failure to learn more. Stockton said, "I left Oklahoma with the feeling that somebody very powerful didn't want the full truth to come out." So, Stockton and Turner's first discovery was that Kerr-McGee's plutonium plant was about to shut down. So you remember they shut it right after she died. They had shut down the plant right before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when Stockton and Turner are poking around. So this may shed some light on the abrupt shutdown. So Kerr-McGee's plutonium plant was about to shut down. The Energy Research and Development Administration, apparently disquieted by the reemerging Silkwood uproar, had decided not to renew the company's contract. "We got the feeling that Kerr-McGee caused the cancellation and hoped that we could call off our investigation," Stockton says. Instead, Stockton and Turner forged ahead. They reviewed the bulging file the AEC had maintained on Kerr-McGee. So remember, AEC has been keeping documents of all these bad things that have been happening. They're just not doing anything to them.
Thousands of violations.
Yes. Just, hey guys, fix that please. All right, we fixed it. All right, sounds good. See you next inspection. And then just the same thing happens again. So they reviewed that bulging document, like all the information that they had, and found that the AEC official reports had been misleading the public about the safety and record-keeping problems at the plant. On January 7th, 1975, the AEC had issued a report that tended to minimize Silkwood's original allegations. However, according to an AEC internal document, Regional Director James G. Kepler was telling Dean McGee that his company had, quote, "serious management problems."
Yeah. To say the least.
Go ahead.
I said to say the least.
Yeah. This closely paralleled Silkwood's charges, oddly enough. Weird. Down in Nashville, meanwhile, Jackie Saruji was at the Tennessean copy desk scanning stories from the United Press International teletype, when she spotted one about Metcalf's entry into the case. On her next day off, she flew to Washington to, quote, "see if anything new had turned up that I could use in my book." She conferred with Turner, found that Congress knew less than her, and she flew back to Nashville.
That's very comforting.
So with her information from Olson, she already had more information than these people do. So Saruji had told Turner about the FBI reports she had photocopied, and she asked Stockton to arrange a follow-up meeting. A few days later, Stockton met Saruji in Nashville. She let him examine a few pages from a stack of papers, but to protect Olson, she did not show him any sensitive reports or say anything about Olson's smuggling theory. "I didn't press her on it," Stockton says, "because I didn't want to get into a journalistic hassle over the First Amendment, and because I assumed we'd get the same reports from the Justice Department." Which you would think, right? I mean,
it's pretty smart. Yeah.
How would this reporter have more information than the Justice Department? I'm going to see whatever she's got anyway.
Right.
I don't got to bug her for it. The Justice Department, however, Dennis, and this is going to surprise you, was not cooperative at all.
Oh.
Stockton and Turner had met with John Keeney and another Deputy Assistant Attorney General on November 20th to request the Silkwood file. The Justice Department officials refused, though. After Stockton and Turner threatened to inveigh with a subpoena, the Justice Department retreated slightly. On November 25th, the two investigators were allowed to inspect Goldstein's meager fact memorandum. In a follow-up meeting, a lower echelon official let it slip that Keeney had specifically censored out Olson's file on Silkwood's contamination and missing plutonium.
Hey, boss, we aren't going to show him the Olson file?
Quote, we're not sure why. It may have made sense, or it may have been too revealing. It may have not made sense, made no sense, or it may have been too revealing, said Stockton. 3 weeks later, after haggling, the Justice Department turned over an edited version of Olson's investigative file. The blanks in the file, Stockton says, raised some wild questions, but the Justice Department refused to release the rest of the file, which included Olson's letterhead memos.
Oh, of course.
On February 13, 1976, Stockton tried unsuccessfully to bypass the department roadblock by phoning Olson in Oklahoma City. Olson told me that he'd been ordered not to talk to me or anyone else from Congress, he said. Stockton made up his mind to fly to Oklahoma City and to Chicago to go to the regional headquarters for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which had assumed the AEC's policing duties. I'm not sure why I didn't get into why the AEC got taken out of control, because they were obviously doing a great job. But another commission was decided to be created. I think this might have already been going on, but they've got control over this plan now. So anyway, for a face-to-face confrontation, he wanted to meet with Olson and NRC officials about the missing plutonium. In preparation for the hearing, in preparation for congressional hearings that he's going to do. So to do so, he needed Senator William Brock from the Senate Government Operations Committee to approve his expense vouchers, which were delayed for several weeks in late March. Stockton and Turner met with a Brock aide, and Stockton was told that the Kerr-McGee inventory wasn't any of his business and an overstep of his authority. Sounds about right at this point, right?
Yeah. I mean, this keeps it. There's a certain level of government where you get to it and they say, stop worrying about the 120 pounds of missing plutonium. I mean, and the fact, honestly, it baffles me that this guy still suspects the Union. It just does not make any sense.
I know. Especially, you would think with all the roadblocks and bureaucracies that would be a really big red flag.
Right.
On like, hey, it seems like when I try to take this to the top doesn't want to talk about this. They must know something. Why would they be in bed with the Union?
Must be a random union, but yeah,
it makes no sense.
No.
So Stockton's only administrative mooring now was with Congressman Dingell. Stockton asked Dingell to pick up where Metcalf had left off. So like he's trying to get this case going again. Like he's pointed in the wrong direction, but he's very motivated. Dingell agreed based on everything that Olson told him, and partially I think because Dingell's father had been a political foe of McGee's former mentor, Senator Robert Kerr, even though they were both Democrats. There was a lot of information about that. Those guys did not like each other. Dingell did not want Silkwood's investigation sacrificed to some lingering senatorial courtesy, and he also felt that the Justice Department was snubbing congressional authority in the case. So even though he had to stretch his subcommittee's jurisdictional limits to take the case, Dingell scheduled hearings for mid-April 1976. So we're now about a year and a half past Karen's death. They're
right.
Still trying to get an investigation to be continued and for it to follow through in some way. So Justice Department officials balked at testifying. And since Dingell's subcommittee, I guess, lacked subpoena power, he didn't have subpoena power. It's very confusing, all the different people that did and didn't. That was a different group that had the subpoena power. That was Metcalf's thing, and they shut it down, remember?
Right, yeah.
He talked to McGee. He talked to McGee, and then he was just like, yeah, when the day they were supposed to start it back up on like December 3rd, he was like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Sorry. And just very quietly moved on. So Stockton then went ahead and sought out Soroji, who was in Washington on leave from the Tennessean while she served a temporary stint as a second-class petty officer in the Naval Reserve. She was working with the Navy on Operation Sanguine, a highly secret communications system for submarines, and the FBI was still using her for surveillance on Sergei Zaitsev.
This lady's all over. I want to read this lady's biography.
She is a pretty interesting one. Also, she had 3 kids that she was like raising at the time. Like
she was monitoring the civil rights movement, USSR people, was doing naval stuff, was investigating.
She had been in the army as well previously.
Raising 3 kids. Wow.
Don't know what her husband did, but he was a super cool guy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, he must have baked
very
a
supportive.
Good pie. Yeah.
So on April 26th, the hearings opened. Physicist Carl Z. Morgan, known as the father of health physics, was the first witness. As a barometer of Silkwood's overall credibility, Stockton had asked him to evaluate her allegations about Kerr-McGee's plant. Morgan surprised the subcommittee's conservative members by embracing Silkwood's criticism, with one exception. Morgan testified that he had never seen a worse plant, and it disgusted him.
This is disgusting. Yeah, faces going down drains.
Exactly. Oh man, I'll never forget the faces going down the drain.
I know. I want to stop saying it. I made some jokes last time, and it bothered me that I made jokes about it. But then I'm like, that's a defense mechanism, man. There's some gross stuff going on in your head.
Yes, pretty much. So the final witness of the day was Soroji. Though she did not volunteer Olson's smuggling theory, she called the Justice Department's closing of the case, quote, very surprising. Then she woke up her tired listeners by mentioning that her opinions were based on nearly 1,000 pages of documents an FBI agent had provided her.
Hey,
what?
You weren't supposed to disclose your source, liar.
Well, she didn't say who it came from.
Yeah, but,
You're going to figure it out. But she does. But officially on the record, she doesn't out him.
Good.
I mean, really, they know she knows things that nobody else but Olson would probably know, so they've probably already put together.
Yeah.
Of course, there was several months where nobody knows what Olson's doing. I feel like so. Who knows?
They're just like, what's Olson doing? I
forgot about Olson. I don't even know what branch he's with. Well, he'd been transferred and his boss got fired, so apparently his new boss never got told about him. Maybe, I guess. It took several months to figure it out, which I really like. That and the plutonium in the desk drawer may be my 2 favorite parts about this story. So reporters began pestering the FBI and Justice Department. Their response was swift and to the point. Soroji was lying, and she was told she may face perjury charges.
Oh, no, you didn't.
So dazed and bewildered by the harshness of the reaction, for 3 days she tried to sort it out. She had not identified Olson as her source, nor did she intend to, since he stood to be penalized for revealing FBI secrets to a reporter. But she assumed that the FBI knew she had talked to Olson and therefore knew she had not lied. On April 29th, Soroji presented herself at FBI headquarters and was directed to the External Affairs Division. She was wearing her Navy uniform and carrying her military tote bag. She had been accustomed to camaraderie in the FBI's company. Again, she's been an operative for a long time. Yeah. Like, they know her. She's been here before. Like, she knows everybody.
She has, like, 9 jobs.
She's a very busy woman.
She's in 2 branches of the military. She works at the FBI. At one point, she was with a magazine, then went to another magazine that didn't know about her other jobs. Yep. She has a book contract. She has 3 kids.
Yep.
This is...
And she's like in her early 30s at this point. So
she's 32. Been going. I feel like a loser.
Yep. It made me feel pretty bad too.
I guess I should feel bad.
No, you should feel bad. So she's used to the camaraderie. She's just being treated well and friendly when she's there. Now she says, though, her treatment was confused. Like, they're kind of hot and cold with her. They grilled her from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. that day. 7 hours. Whoa. They questioned her. She says she was interrogated by 3 top FBI officials, including Homer Boynton and Allison Conley. Boynton acted cheery. Conley was dour. Quote, they grilled me the way detectives do on television.
The old good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, as if I were a criminal. And you remember earlier when they were telling the now women they were watching too much TV, and they were literally doing the thing from TV. I realize it's not the exact same people, but still, they're in the know. So they wanted to know about her 1,000 pages of photocopied documents. She admitted seeing letterhead memos, she recalls, and when she did, their eyes chilled over. Quote, don't ever tell anyone about them, the official told her. So she hit a nerve there. Nobody wants those things to come out publicly because they are like the end all be all, like they're official documents.
Right.
So Boynton and Conley, and I think they're just they're going to make everybody look really bad because they're basically just flat out saying don't investigate this, and they're not giving any reason when you've got this well laid out reason from this respected operative that is now being told stop. It's going to look bad. So Boynton and Conley's major assignment apparently was to get Saruji's signature on a sworn statement that claimed she had never officially received any documents from an FBI employee. The key word here was officially. And eager to repair the damaged feelings between her and the FBI, she signed the statement. The FBI officials seemed relieved, she says, but not entirely satisfied. For the next week, she says they stayed in daily contact with her. When she persisted in her refusal to return the photocopied documents, she says they turned increasingly hostile. One official reminded her the Bureau could, quote, be either her best friend or her worst enemy. Which, again, very, very, very cliche.
I can understand the FBI being your worst enemy, but that'd be weird for the FBI to be your best friend.
Just,
like frolicking. The FBI is going to bring you coffee. Yeah, frolicking.
Frolicking, skipping down through a park. She says they also threatened to frame her as a Soviet espionage agent if she did not cooperate. Because, again, she's dealing with that guy that thinks KGB, and they've got a ton of pictures of her meeting with him. They could easily make this look like she's working for them. And she's going to these nuclear power plants. They can make her look really bad.
Yeah. I kind of do think she's a self-dealer, though.
What do you mean?
I think that she works for the government and stuff, but I think that her motivations are her own. She has all these side projects and stuff. And, just think about this for a second. So, for instance, she felt comfortable stating that she got those 1,000 pages in front of Congress because she, quote, assumed that the FBI knew she had talked to him, but she wouldn't tell the FBI who he was because she didn't want to get him in trouble. So she knew she did not get it officially, but she used the excuse that she got it officially as a reason why she could out him.
No, she never claimed it was in any official capacity. That's what the statement was.
No, but she stated that she assumed she could mention it.
But she's the only witness that could prove that he gave them to her. So she's the only one that can incriminate Olson. That's why it's a big deal. So she can mention it because you can assume it was Olson, but you're not going to be able to prove it. Yeah, I think that's the big deal.
Quote, she did not identify Olson as her source, since he stood to be penalized for revealing it to her, but she assumed the FBI knew she talked to him.
Well,
that's a contradiction.
There are other. Well, but you can't know that it's Olson because there's other people that would have seen those letterhead memos. She could have potentially got them from somebody else. It is most likely to be Olson, but it would take her saying it was Olson to actually be able to do anything to him.
She's using the idea that they knew Olson talked to her as a defense against perjury. She's saying they know I didn't perjure myself because they know I talked to Olson. But then she's saying, but I won't say his name because I don't want to get him in trouble.
But the original offense is them saying that they're going to give her a perjury charge.
Right, because they're saying you're lying about getting documents. But her defense to the perjury
is I have seen your documents.
Well, her defense is they knew I talked to Olson, therefore they knew I had not lied.
She's not saying that out loud. That's her in her head.
Okay.
She's not telling them that. She's not going and telling the FBI that. That's just what she's thinking. Okay.
But she can't really be thinking that. That's what I'm saying.
You're really hung up on this in a really weird way.
I just don't trust her.
Okay. Well, don't trust her.
All right.
The veteran who is.
I think she's amazing, but I think
she was spying on civil rights people, so I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag with her.
Yeah. She probably, the way she was spying on them was writing articles about them. Just listen. She's a self-dealer.
Well, yeah. Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit.
The audience will see it my way.
Okay. So at every turn she remembers, the FBI officials belabored one message. She was to remain silent about everything. On May 3rd, she went back to the Tennessean copy desk, feeling depressed and weary and engulfed by a strange paranoia. Waiting for her was the Tennessean publisher, John Siegenthaler, with some hard questions and a new dilemma. Suddenly confronted, Suruji confessed her entire FBI history, starting with her role in the 60s as a sometimes informant. Siegenthaler pondered that for a day, then decided to fire her. John could not have an FBI spy in his newsroom, he explained, not even one who seemed ready to reject the Bureau. Suruji's firing brought events to a head. An FBI official phoned Suruji the next morning at her apartment. She says and demanded she brief the FBI on what she had told Siegenthaler. He sounded very tense and official, she recalls. He told me I could be prosecuted if I didn't cooperate. I was terrified. Suruji packed toys, clothes, and baby food, gathered her two youngest children, left her oldest son with a friend, and fled Nashville. For the next 10 days, she drove south, searching for relief from the sudden shattering of her career.
Wow.
Siegenthaler, her up till then editor or whatever at the paper she was at, Siegenthaler flew to Washington to file a complaint against the FBI at the Office of Professional Responsibilities in the Justice Department. He had spent 15 years trying to suppress an earlier memory he had of the Bureau. In 1961, while serving as a civil rights advisor to John Kennedy, Siegenthaler had been beaten unconscious by a segregationist mob while FBI agents stood by and watched.
Wow.
Learning that an FBI informant had been on his newspaper's payroll refueled the old antagonism.
She was exactly that type of informant too for the civil rights.
Yep. So I'm sure when he heard that part, he was especially triggered.
It's like, you get out.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I'm sure he tried really hard not to blow up at her right then, and then the calm thing was to fire her. So Siegenthaler was less concerned about Suruji's involvement with the Silkwood case, though. He'd already publicly blasted the FBI and was prepared to raise a further ruckus in the media until he was given a full explanation of all Suruji's activities, including her relationship with Olson. Minutes after Siegenthaler filed his complaint, Homer Boynton dropped by the Washington office of the New York Times for a talk with news editor Bill Kovac and reporter John Crudson, who were at the time planning to write an article about the Siegenthaler-Suruji interplay. Boynton, one of the FBI officials who had been questioning Suruji, counseled the two to forget the Siegenthaler story because, he said, the Tennessean publisher was not entirely pure. Boynton's unsolicited advice boiled down to an accusation that Siegenthaler had secondhand mafia ties.
You have the most... This is the most, like, rat-nest conspiracy story I've ever heard.
It really is. Just so many
like everyone's connected to everybody. We got the freaking National Organization on Women. We got the Mafia. We got plutonium in desk drawers.
Yep.
We got murders. At this point,
faces melting off.
We got this lady with all these jobs.
So Kovac postponed the story while Crudson went to Nashville. Crudson returned with a vindication of Siegenthaler, and on May 19th, the Times reported the entire episode, though it left unanswered the question of why a member of the FBI's ruling circle had chosen to slander the Tennessean publisher. They couldn't figure that one out. Meanwhile, two other FBI officials were trying to persuade Dingell to drop the Silkwood investigation. I remember he's the congressman or senator that's restarted the case. And they reminded Dingell of his tenuous jurisdiction in the case and provided yet another recounting of Silkwood's unconventional sex life.
That's just really hung up on this.
She likes
also she had a boyfriend, like, remember?
Yeah. But she also kind of likes girls too, and that's scary to us.
At this point, though, do we even? I mean, not that it matters.
I mean, with plutonium involved, no, I don't feel like it matters. You're right.
Well, it could just be a lie, though. They're lying about everything else.
I think it was. I didn't leave a lot of it in. I think it was pretty well known that she did kind of swing a little bit both ways.
Okay. Well,
I don't know. I didn't dig real hard into that one. It didn't really matter to me. Like, I'm like, this doesn't add or subtract from her credibility in this story whatsoever. So whatever. But I did leave in all the parts where everybody tried to bring it up as a reason, just because I think it's funny that that's their reaction.
Oh yeah, they're like, we got her.
She's a lesbo.
This is why she crashed. Cause of death.
Just at a time when you like lesbies was like an official term you'd say to like a reporter or something.
I wonder if that's why that now was involved so hard.
I kind of think so. Yeah. Because it was a woman who was, doing something very brave, exposing this humongous company, and then she gets murdered. I think, everybody that kind of came across the story that got involved, that wanted to figure it out, kind of became very passionate about it. I mean, you see people taking leaves of work to fly across the country to investigate this for themselves and stuff. You got Saruji flying back and forth every time, like, she hears something's happening up in Oklahoma. So I think it just really intrigues everybody that's involved.
It's a tantalizing mystery. It's our first two-parter, too. I want to know what happened. You better tell me by the end of this what happened. Okay.
We're getting there. So Dingle demanded to know why Saruji, an uncelebrated journalist, had copies of FBI reports when the Justice Department was refusing them to Congress. And he wanted Olson produced for his staff. Grudgingly, the Bureau agreed. Stockton and Michael Ward, the subcommittee's general counsel, questioned Olson for more than 40 hours.
Wow.
During that entire time, at a minimum, there was at least one FBI agent hovering around, listening to Olson's every word. Quote, it was like Olson was under house arrest, Stockton says. He couldn't even go to the restroom without an FBI escort. So it's like this guy's a prisoner now for some reason. Like he's one of their field agents. Olson's answers, consequently, were often evasive and unsubstantial. He made only one reference to the thwarting of his investigation, remarking cryptically he had not been allowed to interview anyone in the union. Which might be why he kind of thought the union was stealing it, because he is kind of being veered away the whole time from the union. He's not supposed to talk to them.
Right.
So that that kind of may lead him to think, hey, they're conspiring with whoever's higher up as well, but they may be the ones physically stealing it.
But also the union are the only people who would contradict the story that this was a union.
They've also been pushing for investigation really hard. Like they weren't satisfied with any initial reports.
I kind of see Olson as like, maybe
I mean, he's part of the FBI. Well, he's part of the FBI. I don't think he's at this point jaded in any way towards the FBI. He is a little bit. He's kind of feeling that way towards Kerr-McGee, but he still thinks, I think, everybody above him is on the up and up. Right. So twice during the week when Olson was being interviewed, he would call Stockton's home late at night. He'd refuse to give his name and ask to be regarded as an anonymous tipster, but Stockton recognized his muted drawl. Quote, now I know what it feels like to be captured by the Gestapo. Stockton also remembered Olson pleading with him, please leave Saruji out of this. She's just going to get hurt unnecessarily. The FBI will never tell you the truth. They can't afford to. Just forget the whole thing. Give up. You're in over your head. This thing is so complicated, you'll never figure it out. You'll just go crazy trying.
Calling up like,
this dude is losing his mind a little.
This is not Olson. Help me.
This dude is losing his mind a little bit, I feel like.
Yeah.
So on May 7th, the Dingle staff heard Olson's limited testimony behind closed doors. On May 20th, the subcommittee resumed open hearings. Deputy Associate Director James Adams appeared before the microphone to disassociate the FBI from the Olson-Saruji talks, without conceding there had been any. Seigenthaler also appeared. He had come to put the FBI's shabby treatment of him on the congressional record, which I don't know how he got on this exactly, but he's on it. But in the course of this denunciation, he testified that Tsurugi had told him she had photocopied Olson's documents and showed him 2 letters from Olson contradicting the FBI's official denials and publicly reviving all the controversy. So now Olson is on blast.
My theory, Olson
and
just
now
not.
Tsurugi is a liar.
Yeah.
Publicly. And on the record.
Oops.
So, for week, well, I guess I don't know. Yeah, I guess she kind of, I don't know if she directly said no, it wasn't Olson. I think they didn't really poke around at that directly. She just wouldn't say where it came from. So for weeks now, Stockton had been brooding about the strange, unsettling nature of the case, wondering why the nation's top law enforcement officials were acting so guilty. Since Tsurugi's testimony, their actions had become more exaggerated and desperate. In those 3 weeks, the FBI had been vigorously trying to undermine Tsurugi's credibility with the subcommittee. Associate FBI Director Nicholas Callahan, the Bureau's #2 man, who, just as a side note, was later forced out of his job in an unrelated corruption scandal, and his chief deputy, James Adams, had hinted to Stockton and Dingell that Tsurugi might be a KGB spy. Remember when they threatened her?
Yeah, and now they're doing it.
They're doing it.
They warned you.
They told you what they were going to do. But that rumor failed to take hold. They didn't believe it. So the FBI men tried again. Tsurugi should be ignored, they had suggested, because the Army had discharged her for mental instability. Callahan and Adams had then produced a copy of her alleged psychiatric discharge in 1962. Stockton got the feeling, though, that it was forged. Tsurugi said she had received an honorable discharge with no mention of psychiatric reasons. The FBI had been aware of her Army background when it used her as an informant, she pointed out, as well as the Naval Reserve when it assigned her to the sensitive Operation Sanguine. So if she's got mental problems, why are we putting her on super secret submissions?
And letting her spy on KGB people.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense. So on May 24th, Stockton huddled with Dingell. Both were convinced at this point that the FBI and the Justice Department had tried to impede, manipulate, and deceive their investigation. The next day, Dingell sent a letter to Attorney General Edward Levy demanding an immediate, unabridged explanation of the FBI's and the Justice Department's behavior. Tsurugi, meanwhile, returned to Nashville, hoping that the controversy about her had passed. Instead, when she got home, she was greeted by an FBI official who was still trying to retrieve Olson's files. So Dingell's trying to get the FBI and Justice Department to tell the truth, and Tsurugi's just trying to go home, still getting harassed by the FBI. So at first, she had assumed the government was worried about the file because of the fact memorandum, which showed how the Justice Department had twisted facts to disprove the hit-and-run theory. But that didn't make sense because Stockton and Dingell had already seen the fact memorandum. Then she remembered how apprehensive the FBI officials had been when she had mentioned the letterhead memos. Olson had told her about the exchange of letterhead memos over his smuggling theory, but she had generally discounted the theory because it lacked proof. Now she began to reevaluate it. If the FBI officials thought she had the letterhead memos and was afraid of them, she decided Olson's theory must be right. All the pieces suddenly fit. Silkwood's missing manila folder must have contained evidence of a plutonium black market. The smugglers must have contaminated her refrigerator and run her off the road. Now, for national security reasons, or because of professional incompetence, the Justice Department was covering up a murder.
Well, if the Union was a smuggling operation, I guess Olson's theory doesn't. It kind of
makes sense that maybe they're involved because they would be the workers that are doing this.
It just seems like the very powerful company with ties to the agency and the FBI would choose to shut it down instead of and also once Silkwood died, the I think you said that the smuggling like doubled. It went from like 40 to 60. Yeah.
No, it went up over 100.
Yeah, it went from like 40 or 60 to 120 is what you said. Yeah. So I still lean in that the union's like some sort of weird scapegoat, but I guess if you're, I mean, everybody's so incompetent in the story. I guess.
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
There's so much of that going on. So on June 4th, we're in 1976, while she stood in line at the Nashville Unemployment Office, two local television teams asked her for an impromptu interview. She had considered holding a large-scale press conference, but presented with this opportunity, she blurted out her secret, a solution to the Silkwood mystery distilled from Olson's findings and her own analysis. A smuggling ring was the culprit, she said. Then, 2 weeks later, on June 21st, shortly after the deadline Dingell had imposed on the Attorney General, a mafia call girl from suburban Detroit named Dingell as one of her clients. My first reaction, says one of Dingell's staffers, was that the FBI had decided the best way to deal with Dingell was to smear him like everyone else.
Right.
The call girl, Lois Herman, insisted that the FBI had not encouraged her to implicate Dingell in a sex scandal, and Dingell denied the accusation. But it turned out that the FBI had inexplicably tipped off local police to Herman, and that Herman's close friend, another call girl who had helped her set up her clientele, is a longtime FBI informant.
Some spy stuff, man.
Like, I feel like they either had stuff on these women or just paid them to then say this.
I'm sure they just paid. I mean, what are you gonna have on a call girl other
Well,
than being a call
they've
girl?
got them working. So, I mean, they've got them working for them already. They're pumping them for information about people. So
Yeah,
who
I'm
knows what their
sure. I'm
motivation
sure the
is.
FBI set up appointments for them.
That's also possible too.
I mean, yeah.
So for the next 5 months, the Silkwood investigation stayed in limbo, with while Dingell occupied himself with other legislative affairs and tended to his reelection chores, because that's important. So the Rolling Stones spent the fall of 1976 retracing the 2 year history of the Silkwood. They did amazing journalism all through this. Like, a lot of this stuff I got from the Rolling Stone. Like, they were really hard at following the story for years. So among the dozens of enduring questions, there seemed three most basic. Was Silkwood carrying documents that are now missing? Is plutonium missing from the Kerr-McGee plant? And why is the federal government engaged in a cover-up? The answer to the missing papers question is an almost definite yes. According to an AEC report, Kerr-McGee supervisors found out that Silkwood was collecting a dossier for the OCA shortly before her death. Two persons who saw Silkwood at a union meeting the night of the accident say she was carrying a large manila folder. In the interim, Kerr-McGee's personnel twice visited the garage where the car was stored. The first was about midnight, 5 hours after the accident, ostensibly to check for plutonium contamination. An AEC inspector and Trooper Fagan accompanied the Kerr-McGee representatives, but the AEC man admits the documents could have been stolen without him noticing. I'm just going to turn my back for a minute while you guys finish looking at this car. Don't mind me. I'm not going to turn around. Officer,
Yeah.
turn around with me.
Excuse me.
Yep, that's pretty much how I think it happened. The second visit, this time without Fagan, was the following morning, and also the AEC wasn't there either. These were Kerr-McGee men unchaperoned by themselves.
I bet you the first night they were just checking to see what was in there, and then those dudes are the ones that stole it.
That's very possible. They reported back, we saw a folder in the back seat, there's a bunch of papers, we'll go get those papers. You're probably right. That may have been what happened. Nothing may have been stolen the first night. I don't know.
I did my whole turnaround thing and everything.
The manila folder was definitely missing, though.
Yeah.
So the answer to the missing plutonium question is more equivocal. Reliable government sources told the Rolling Stone that twice in 1974, the Kerr-McGee inventory was absent substantial amounts of plutonium, over 20 pounds in February and under 20 pounds in September. Both times Kerr-McGee told the AEC it found the missing nuclear fuel through accounting adjustments or lodged in pipes. Through accounting adjustments are lodged in pipes. So we changed some numbers or it got stuck.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, the more we talk about this plant with its like crazy like secret closets they would send employees to and stuff, it's just like a madhouse.
Yep. The AEC inspected and agreed that all 40 pounds had been recovered, but that may not mean it was. Even under ideal conditions, government inspectors concede the technicalities and handicaps of rechecking a nuclear inventory often forces them to simply accept the company's word.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to go say, give me all your plutonium, let's put it on the scale, come on, let's go?
Well, they come by and check, and that's how they figure out that it's short. But they don't come back and recheck it because that would take too much time.
Yeah. So also, how do you know you can't take a fleck of plutonium and say, well, this one was here last time, but this one wasn't here last time? Like, you can't.
Yeah, they would just have to produce more plutonium, which luckily with plutonium it just reproduces, so that wouldn't be hard.
We literally talked in the first episode how you can make more plutonium from plutonium
by using plutonium. Yeah. So the AEC, okay, so they agreed that the 40 pounds had been recovered, and okay, so and given the scandal that would ensue, it is the company's interest to. Okay, sorry, I lost my spot. Even under ideal conditions, government inspectors concede the technicalities and handicaps of rechecking nuclear inventory often force them to simply accept the company's word. And given the scandal that would ensue, it is in the company's interest to lie rather than to admit a shortfall. So they're better off if they just, say we found it, no matter whether they found it or not. Yeah. Kerr-McGee has furthermore taken the position that no discussion of missing nuclear material is for the public arena. Even if plutonium had been stolen, Kerr-McGee said they will not inform the media. Their reason is that blackmailers or terrorists could use the information to their advantage. The AEC and NRC have often brandished the same logic in refusing to disclose such statistics to Congress itself.
That is terrifying.
Yeah. We can't tell anybody.
I don't necessarily need to know plutonium's missing, but I at least want Congress to know and the FBI.
I think the people making decisions about the country should know about
right
tons and tons of plutonium just floating around freely that we don't know where it is.
I wish you hadn't even told me this about plutonium. So if you want to keep it out of the media, I'm cool with that. But I need some FBI agents trying to find that plutonium.
Yes.
While I go live my normal life.
So back in January 1975, shortly after Olson sent his letterhead memo requesting permission to investigate possible smuggling at the plant, the NRC, which at that point was just taking over for the AEC, which is kind of weird. The plant shutdown happens, the AEC stops covering the plant, a new place takes over. Kind of like we've seen in other things when people catch on to what they're doing, is it just shifts to a new bureau, a new group that's overseeing this, and the other one's disbanded or at least not on this anymore. So the NRC's on it, and they sent 3 safety experts to inspect the plant's inventory, procedures, and security programs. In a letter to the regional director, the NRC commissioners asked to be kept informed on a day-to-day basis of the progress of upgrading the safeguard program at the plant. That was according to NRC Commissioner Victor Galiski, who flew to Oklahoma City for a first-hand look. Simultaneously, Olson was obtaining information that the plutonium was missing at the same time. So again, other people, there's so many people looking at this all at the same time.
Right.
So again, they abruptly shut down the plant, they abruptly stopped sending angry letters to Kerr-McGee about missing plutonium, and instead just changed their allowable margin of error and increased it by 250%.
How big was the margin of error?
I'm not sure. I didn't want to know, honestly. But it's been okay for like 20 pounds to be missing at a time without any major red flags, so it must be a decent amount. You can flush 40 pounds out of pipes, apparently, so who knows?
At one point, let's do the math. At one point, they were 40 pounds down, so 350. So at some point, you're basically allowed to lose 10 pounds of plutonium, and a softball size of man, I think I have plutonium poisoning, man. I'll tell you what.
I think
we all do.
I think we all might have plutonium poisoning. So it was pretty obvious that the NRC no longer really wanted to reconcile the inventory figures or had been ordered not to try anymore. which I think that might be it. I think somebody told him, like, hey, I know you're new, but let me tell you how this worked with the AEC. You're only here because they figured out the AEC.
My theory is still they know exactly where it's going. Everyone at the top level is on the same page, and they're shifting around these regulatory rules that nobody reads, just so everything's on the up and up if you ever look at it later.
I think that's exactly what's going on. So all of this leaves the question of responsibility for any mini plutonium open to several possible answers. Olson's original theory that Silkwood or others in the Union were involved does not hold up. Silkwood did not have the means to market the stolen plutonium, and the Union had been in the forefront of calling for full disclosure of the case. Logistically, smuggling 40 to 120 pounds of plutonium from the plant would have required an unlikely conspiracy of 15 to 20 workers. The plutonium was more vulnerable to theft while en route to government testing facility in Hanford, Washington. Shipments could have been rerouted and then sold on the black market very easily. Because Kerr-McGee is in charge of keeping close watch of the plutonium, it seems likely that any large-scale smuggling would probably have involved the complicity of the company's upper levels. Someone would have to falsify records, lie to the AEC inspectors, and locate black market buyers. Now, in September 1976, the General Accounting Office submitted a report to Congressman Dingell that he says clearly shows that there is no factual way the government can determine whether nuclear material is lost or stolen.
That's maybe the most terrifying thing I've ever heard the government say.
It's upset me every time I've gone across that line.
The Government Accounting Office says there's no factual way to determine whether nuclear material is lost or stolen.
Nope. And at this point, nuclear material floating around for about 30 years. I mean, now even longer now. It's almost 80.
I mean, I wonder at this point, if there's so much of this stuff and it's so easy to steal it, why doesn't, like, every country that can, like, pay a reporter, you know what I mean, to get access to this stuff, have nuclear weapons?
I don't know. They might. Who knows? In October 1975, the Hudson Institute, a politically conservative think tank, issued a study that warned of a gray market in which nuclear companies use legal loopholes to circumvent government controls on plutonium and uranium. Such loopholes allow companies to bypass congressional scrutiny and sell nuclear contracts to international consortiums. The GAO report roundly criticized Congress for not taking steps to correct the situation. The Congressional Joint Committee on Atomic Energy reacted to the criticism by trying to sanitize the report, a move that Dingell prevented only by personally governing its release. The Joint Committee, which had been stripped of some power, had a history of babying the nuclear industry and consorting with its representatives, and that 87% of top NRC officials previously worked for private concerns holding NRC contracts.
Agency capture, man. It's that revolving door. It's like, who are you going to hire? Are you going to hire people who know what they're doing? And it just revolving door between government and corporations.
Yep. Such coziness could explain why the NRC seemed to pull back from a hard look at Kerr-McGee's inventory in early 1975. And if Silkwood unwittingly stumbled across falsified inventory records, that would explain why Kerr-McGee officials might try to recover her manila folder, and why Dean McGee might intervene with Senator Metcalf to quash a congressional investigation. The FBI and Justice Department might aid a cover-up simply to avoid a scandal that would jeopardize the nuclear industry's credibility. The Kerr-McGee's plant held a key to the latest nuclear technology at the time. Plutonium was being processed for experiments in a new nuclear reactor, the fast breeder. Or their role might be cloaked in a larger definition of national security. Also told friends he learned that Kerr-McGee sent a shipment of plutonium, not on a regular consignment, to the Special Projects Program in Hanford, Washington, a few weeks before Silkwood's death. As far as can be determined, the Hanford facility did not have a Special Projects Program.
Weird. So that's either them selling it on the gray market, or there is a Special Projects Program, but they just won't acknowledge its existence.
I'm thinking more of that one. If the CIA was smuggling Kerr-McGee's plutonium overseas, it would expect the company's support. Both Dean McGee and Robert Kerr have longstanding ties with the defense and intelligence communities. In the early 60s, McGee served as a presidential appointee on the Arms Control and Disarmament Advisory Commission, a group that helps oversee U.S. policies on nuclear weapons proliferations. At the same time, Senator Kerr, had jurisdiction over weapons policies and was privy to Pentagon and CIA secrets as chairman of the Senate's Aeronautics and Space Science Committee. Kerr also worked closely with the Joint Energy Committee and at times served as a liaison for the nuclear industry to the CIA. According to one CIA source, Kerr's relationship with the CIA dated from 1948 when the agency provided money and other political assistance in his first race for the Senate.
That was like the beginning of the CIA, and they were already funding candidates? Man, all right, we live in this whole government, everything's okay. I laughed when they said like certain presidential candidates and stuff were groomed by the CIA. This is literally that happening at the very beginning. Man, dude, I don't even know what color this pill is, man, because like we live in some sort of
It's a brown pill, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
It's the turd of a pill.
This is basically intelligence agencies routinely interfere in elections. I mean, we kind of know that from the last election, but like, how common has this been?
I don't know.
Why do they support certain people? Like, that's okay. Well, this will be a whole other episode. I'm gonna put together an episode on this. I'm gonna look into the CIA and elections thing, and this is gonna be an episode.
So, if the CIA had engineered the smuggling, it almost certainly would compel the Justice Department to join in the cover-up. See, a congressional investigation corroborated an allegation that the CIA has had a pact with the Justice Department since 1954 to keep many crimes secret in the name of national security. And if the CIA is orchestrating the cover-up, that could explain any and all of the mishaps that beset the Silkwood case.
Right.
They're just going to back each other up on this lie.
Yeah. So and the CIA can do whatever it wants, and then the FBI can say whatever it wants. It's a perfect partnership.
Yep. Well, it's with the Justice Department. It's the CIA and Justice Department, which oversees the FBI. It's even
the CIA is part of the NSA, and the Justice Department is over the FBI. It's just, yeah, it's saying this group can commit any crime they want, and this group is in charge of investigating it, and will say whatever you need them to say. It's the perfect. Oh man, this is depressing. Okay, keep going.
On November 5th, 1976, shortly before the second anniversary of Karen Silkwood's death, a lawsuit got filed in federal court. It accused Kerr-McGee officials of conspiring to violate Silkwood's civil rights, charged FBI officials with conducting a cover-up, and asked for $160,000 in reparations. The suit was filed on behalf of Silkwood's parents. Bill Silkwood had just returned from a week's trip to Washington, where he gave final approval for the suit. The Silkwoods devoted a lot of thought to the legacy of their daughter's death. More than anything, they wanted the truth to come out. A year before, as they were calling on Senators Rybakoff and Metcalf to reopen the case, another daughter, Rosemary, Karen's sister, was shaken up and slightly injured by a side-swiping motorist in Netherlands.
Wow.
So somebody else
tried to pull the same move on her sister.
Yep. To get at her dad, essentially, I think. So next, while the suit was being readied, a phone caller pretending to be Merle Silkwood, the mother, tried to lure their youngest daughter, Linda, from school to an unknown rendezvous.
That's creepy as hell. That is like horror movie stuff.
Yeah. And this is the CIA or Kerr-McGee or who knows who's doing this. The caller asked Linda's high school principal to send her outside so she could be picked up for a fictitious doctor's appointment. The ploy failed only because Linda became suspicious and double-checked with her mother, who of course told her that's no. I didn't find anything further on that. I really hope parents came and picked her up at school like immediately though. So Bill Silkwood believed that both incidents were warnings meant to scare him, but he said he wouldn't be deterred. A movie was later made about Karen as well. Larry Cano, the film group's co-producer, says he was harassed throughout production. He was tailed, and a Los Angeles loan company was questioned about his finances. According to Pacific Finance branch representative Karen M. Karish, a man called on October 4th and told her Cano was a suspected subversive and revolutionary. The man, quote, claiming to be investigating on behalf of the Defense Department. Later on, it turned out, though, it was James Reading, the security chief at Kerr-McGee, that was calling.
Oh.
The FBI continued to badger Saruji for the documents she photocopied. On December 1st, 1976, Allison Conley, a top FBI official who had interrogated her earlier from Washington, conferred with her lawyer in the office of the U.S. Attorney in Nashville. Conley outlined an ultimatum. Either Saruji hand over every document, or she will be prosecuted for possession of stolen government material. Her answer, an unhesitating no. She hid them because she had come to regard them as her insurance.
Oh, yeah. I'd do the same thing.
So Congressman Dingell announced the Silkwood hearings to resume on December 2nd after the national election. And so, again, this is back to, I guess I mixed this in twice. So, again, the investigation pops up. Oh, no, this is a different investigation. This is Dingell doing this, and this is in the Metcalfe one. Sorry, there's so many investigations going on. I'm like, did I already talk about that one? Okay, so in December, Congressman Dingell, so this is 1976, Congressman Dingell announced the Silkwood hearing to resume on December 2nd after the national election. But on December 2nd, Dingell's scheduled hearings got canceled. For 6 months, the FBI and Justice Department delayed an answer to Dingell's demand for a full explanation. Then they refused to testify. Their excuse now is that they were being sued by Silkwood's parents. On December 7th, 1976, the House Democratic Caucus voted on a motion to strip the subcommittee chairmanship from Dingell. The vote is 85 to 67 against Dingell. So the move is kind of convoluted. Dingell's removal is obviously to the advantage of Kerr-McGee, the FBI, and the Justice Department.
Well, he was implicated with the prostitute, Patrick.
Yep. So obviously he's discredited now.
Yeah.
Just sex stuff all over the place causing problems. So the lawsuits go on for years. The Silkwood estate filed the suit in 1977, and it took 2 years. In 1979, a federal court jury in Oklahoma City awarded $10,500,005 in damages, which is way more than that 160 they were originally asking for. But all but 5,000 of that award was struck down on appeal.
Whoa!
I know, isn't that weird?
That's a big swing.
Kerr-McGee's pulling hard at this. So lawyers were preparing for a second trial sometime the next year in 1980 when the settlement was agreed upon. Or I'm sorry, it went on for several years past that. So they start setting back up again. I'm not sure what strung everything out, but it strung out for several years.
It's litigation, man.
Yeah. So from 79 to 86, they battled in court and stuff, and then on August 22nd, 1986, Kerr-McGee agreed to end 10 years of litigation by paying $1.38 million to the estate of nuclear worker Karen Silkwood. So Kerr-McGee's director of corporate communications, Rick Perilous, said the company's decision to settle the case was primarily a financial one. Quote, "We firmly believe Kerr-McGee would have won the scheduled retrial. However, burdensome legal costs and significant time demands would be imposed on our company and our people by the trial and inevitably appeals." As is common with such settlements, Kerr-McGee continued to deny any fault or any liability for Silkwood's contamination. And jump to today, 45 years later, Dennis, Karen Silkwood's death still remains a mystery.
Whoa. All right. Well,
that is all the information. It pretty much stopped in the late 70s. Just
Well, it
nothing
seems like
came.
this poured over pretty much every single possible angle. What's your theory, start to finish?
I mean, honestly, I think higher ups at the plant were involved in smuggling, but I also think they were just very greedy with the safety stuff. Like they just didn't care, which was ultimately kind of their demise. Like had they been keeping up this factory properly, training people properly, not cutting those corners, like you said earlier, they probably would have gotten away with this. But I think probably the AEC, like there was that secret project. I think it's going a bunch of different places. I don't think there's one place where like it's all going to secret projects. I think we probably did give it to other countries. Um, and I think the FBI and the Justice Department and everybody else just kind of got roped in inadvertently. I don't know that they were involved in any way prior to it, but because everybody seems to be buddy buddy in this situation, it just became covering up. They got told about like this is funding nuclear research over here that we can't tell everybody about. We need that stuff to continue. We need this to all go away. All right, well, it's for the greater good. We'll help you.
Yeah.
I think is what happened. I don't think the union was doing anything.
No.
I don't rule out that there may have been people that were in the union that were also involved in the smuggling, though. But I don't think they were higher ups. I don't think they were anybody that was really influencing anything. I think they were just workers that were doing this. So I wouldn't rule that out.
I agree with you. So tell me about the murder, though. How do you see the murder going down?
Hmm. I think that was the plan. I think the security probably had something to do with it, or at least orchestrate it. Maybe the Pinkertons are involved in some way. I directly think it was it was ordered by Kerr-McGee though. With
Not the government.
I think the government was aware afterwards. I don't know that that would have been the way. I mean, if you think about the way she got taken out, it's not the most effective way. It seems like if it was a government hit, it would have been better orchestrated and there would have been less questions involved,
Right.
in my opinion. It seemed like somebody goofed because again, nobody seems like they're doing their job very well. It kind of seems like they didn't realize how far along she'd gotten in her investigation. They found out she was going to meet this reporter somehow and that she was going to take all this stuff, and it was just a panic reaction. I think they were originally trying to slowly poison her,
Yeah.
or at least scare her away from the plant. But I do
Right.
think it was the plant. I think past that, it's just everybody gets involved to keep this machine going. It's Kerr-McGee that actually commits the crime, but then everybody else is just involved in helping them pull it off.
Yeah, I think I agree
I think every
largely.
government agency involved in this story was on the higher up levels was aware of what happened, was aware that Karen Silkwood was murdered. I believe wholeheartedly she was murdered. That had nothing to do with a half a pill she had in her system
No, no, or anything else.
or anything else. A sip of liquor, like she didn't even have enough that it registered as like she was drunk or tipsy.
Well,
Like
it
it was,
also says she left from a union meeting.
yeah, she'd been there talking and stuff. So maybe she had a drink or a sip of something while she was there, but she'd been actively doing things. Like she was alert. And based on the way the car veered and the skid marks going down for like a mile where she's driving straight on that opposite side of the road on the shoulder and then freaks out and swerves past that to not go head on into something from there.
Right. I'm with you, dude. No, I'm with you. I think we could debate forever about the particularities about which agency did what or what, but it just seems like Kerr-McGee was a very politically connected company. They were literally how we manufactured plutonium. I'm sure maybe the military, definitely the intelligence agencies had uses for that plutonium that we had to keep off the books.
Mm-hmm.
They ran a loose ship, I'm sure, in some ways for cost cutting, but in other ways because
Just
it would
lazy. We
help
don't
you
have to
keep things
care.
off the books. Yeah, you don't have to care. The agencies, I'm sure the AEC was in on it from the beginning, and then either their private security company who probably either was, had connections with the intelligence agencies, or the company itself could just be like, "Whoops, we murdered someone."
I think it
Definitely
might be
murdered
a
her.
whoops thing with the car based on what they did to other people, like her sister and stuff. Like, I don't know that they necessarily meant to kill her. It may have just gone too far.
Well, I mean, whoops, like um, they definitely maybe meant to.
Well, they meant to hit her.
Even if they meant, yeah, right. Whether they were trying to warn her and it went crazy, or they meant to murder her, they have a good enough relationship with the government that they know who to call and say, this isn't going to go anywhere. Yeah, if you want your plutonium. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So that is the end of, that's what we know. This one goes to a dead end. I'll leave this up to, we've told you guys what we think. I'll leave this up to the listeners though. Like, come to your own conclusion on all this. There's a lot there, and there was no real way to leave any part of this story out. Like, it all these different aspects felt so important, especially with what we're trying to do on this show. Like, it's just corruption at every turn. Like, everybody is involved. They're all dirty once you get up high.
I think this is a great find, and you did a great job presenting. I do have one gripe though, and that is that an hour ago I said, "You better tell me what happened." And the last line of your story was, "To this day, it remains a mystery." So you're a dirty liar, Patrick.
I'm sorry. I wanted to have your hopes up so you didn't just completely fall into a depressed hole.
I think it's pretty clear, though, even though we don't know the exact names. I mean, everyone could listen to this and kind of know what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did fall asleep at the wheel. Karen Silkwood was murdered because she was trying to expose things.
I think accidentally, to be honest. I think she probably was more concerned with safety things, but she just so happened to photograph, to photocopy.
That's a good point to make, yeah.
Yeah. I don't even think she was onto the real story.
Oh, I think she knew, but I think she thought it was more people being lazy and stuff. Like the way everything was managed, like, oh, they're dropping 20 pounds of plutonium on the floor. Because I left it out. At one point, something leaked, and they had like a foot of standing like plutonium waste in like one of the reactor rooms. Like, just horrible things that took like long periods to clean up. And the AEC just let them keep going. So
I'm just saying, I don't think she was aware of what she had, which was a clandestine operation to move plutonium. She thought she just had a really unsafe workplace.
And I think that was kind of the conclusion that Saruji kind of came to, that like she had this information, but she didn't necessarily know the extent of what she had. She was just compiled everything she could and was taking it to people that could help with it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, rest in peace, Karen Silkwood.
Karen Silkwood, you were a hero. You really were. So, thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back next week. This is going to be like a bonus thing, it looks like. So, Wednesday, there'll be something else. Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. Like, rate, subscribe, do all those things. And we'll be back. Thank you.
Bye,
Dennis.
Bye, Patrick.
Love you.
I love you too.